March 2005, in a stretch of ocean south of Greenland, where nautical maps still leave blank swaths of deep blue yet to be named, a strange signal echoed from the autonomous device DeepSon 5. The device belonged to an underfunded project by the Copenhagen Institute of Seismology, tasked with surveying the melting ice margins, a small program under the sponsorship of the Nordic Climate Agency, largely overlooked. But precisely because no one was paying attention, no one intervened when it recorded something at dawn on March 14th. It was a sequence of evenly spaced sounds, each pulse exactly 4.8 seconds apart, a rhythm uncommon in nature but eerily close to the resting heart rate during deep sleep. At first, the research team assumed it was magnetic interference, perhaps from tectonic movement under the seafloor following the glacial period. But when the signal was run through spectral analysis, the resulting graph revealed a waveform mirroring the biological rhythm of life. Something is beating, wrote researcher Jens Karlström in his first report, but not the biology of a hearted organism. It's the simulation of a once-living system's rhythm. The coordinates of the signal traced to deep within an uncharted marine trench, a location the team would later name the Silent Verge, because every sonar system deployed there returned distorted echoes. Even stranger, just 2 nautical miles away, geodetic equipment detected an unusually long metallic mass, not rock, not a sunken fishing vessel, and symmetrically structured like artificial architecture. The mystery deepened when the AI system proposed, this structure may be the remains of a large submarine hull. From there, anomalies began falling into place. A reverse search across civilian, military, and naval route databases from the entire 20th century yielded no matching records. But one technician, manually browsing microfilm archives in an international library, stumbled upon an old news brief from 1956. Civilian submarine Ereithus disappears with 1,500 people en route from Halifax to Iceland. No photo, no passenger list, no official statement from any government. The article was pulled from print 1 week later. When the team accessed NATO maritime route records from 1950 to 1960, every entry related to Ereithus displayed the same red text. No record, classified, or erasure. A colossal ship with 1,500 people, once officially documented, now wiped from all modern systems. From the fragmented remains of a private research archive in Zurich, only one diagram survived. A rhomboid vessel, no windows, no propellers, only a single axial system running nose to tail, resembling a capsule or a memory chamber. A question echoed in the minds of the researchers. If Ereithus truly existed, why was the world forced to forget it? And what lies within that metallic structure on the ocean floor, the one pulsing with life after nearly half a century? No one has answered that yet. But one thing is certain. That signal, that heartbeat of something that has waited too long, did not awaken by chance in 2005. Something beneath the deep has stirred. On March 21, 2005, the deep-sea research vessel Odessa Morn entered a stretch of water temporarily designated as the Silent Edge. On deck, Dr. Eleanor Ask, a marine scientist and ancient linguistics expert, led a special research team of 7, bringing with them the deep-diving probe system Polaris 8, which had been specially developed to explore regions with strong electromagnetic interference. The sea here was eerily calm, as if covered by a sheet of darkened glass. No waves, no wind, and most strangely of all, no signs of life. At 2:14 a.m., Polaris 8 began its descent to a depth of 3,900 meters. When its searchlights illuminated the abyss, what emerged from the darkness was not the shattered wreck of a typical ship. Instead, they found a structure over 300 meters long, shaped like a solid cast bullet. Its surface bore no weld lines, no signs of rust, only a layer of dark sediment, as fine as ash. No seams, no hatches, no windows. Polaris 8 circled the object, detecting perfectly symmetrical features from bow to stern, as if the entire vessel had been born, not built. When detailed sonar scans were run, the AI simulation suggested the interior was hollow, but the echo patterns didn't follow the laws of physics. Some waves entered but didn't bounce back, as if space itself was bent inside. At 4:42 a.m., one of the robot's manipulators struck a small area near the nose of the craft, dislodging a patch of sediment and revealing a tiny fracture. no more than 40 centimeters long, but enough to glimpse an object stuck within, a rectangular item wrapped in a lead metal casing with no lock. The object was brought to the surface and examined in a sterile pressure chamber. When the outer casing was opened, the team was speechless. The book, if it could be called that, contained no paper but 40 thin sheets resembling bone, soft and cool, like human skin, yet entirely inorganic. The surfaces were covered in rows of repeating, sharp, evenly spaced symbols, neither resembling known writing nor machine codes. Eleanor attempted identification. No known script on Earth matched. No ancient languages. No modern Unicode. No ASCII, hieroglyphs, Latin, Greek, or Arabic. No recognizable pattern of any civilized origin. With trembling hands, she turned to the second page. In the center was a single line, short and larger than the rest. After weeks of analysis and structural comparison, the research team believed it might be a title. The line read, /remember_001::, entry // Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't explain how, but she understood its meaning, even though the characters before her were utterly foreign. The following pages seemed to record something akin to a journal or a log of a consciousness not human, but trying to describe the surrounding world using the structures of human language. No one in the team slept that night. The next morning, Polaris 8 conducted a second dive, this time focusing on the midsection of the object. When its lights scanned across the body, a sight left everyone holding their breath. The entire vessel, from end to end, had no windows, not sealed shut, simply never constructed with any. A civilian submarine allegedly built to carry 1,500 people, with no windows, no emergency exits, no staircases, as if it was never meant to be exited, never meant for humans to look outside, or worse, never meant to traverse normal physical space. A question formed on every face. If there was no way in and no way out, then where did the people inside ever go? In her personal journal, Eleanor wrote, "I don't think this is a vessel. I think it's a memory, a structure that contains thought. But the question is, whose thought? And why bury it at the bottom of the ocean?" The book was sent to a materials analysis lab in Hamburg. 3 days later, their response was brief. The composition of the pages matched no known elements on the periodic table. It couldn't be burned, cut, or replicated. The final line in their report, "We're not sure this is even matter." And in their last internal meeting, Eleanor looked around the room and whispered hoarsely, as if afraid of her own words, "If this is the memory of a non-human intelligence, then what lies at the bottom isn't a ship, it's a sleeping brain." On the morning of March 25, 2005, the sky above the silent periphery darkened unnaturally, despite no weather forecast predicting storms. The sea surface was dead calm, and the navigation system of the Odessa Morn began registering massive anomalies. The compass slowly spun counterclockwise, then stopped, pointing in only one direction, downward. At that exact moment, without any command or operator input, the bottom camera suddenly turned and fixed its focus directly on the hull of the Arethusa. A deep, low rumble echoed through the sonar speakers, like a sound rising from the very core of the Earth. And then, something happened that no one expected. A horizontal crack across the ship's hull began to split open. Thick layers of steel slid silently to each side, revealing a hatch, just large enough for an adult to crawl through. No smoke, no escaping air, no change in pressure. The door simply opened, as if it were the very first time in 49 years. Dr. Eleanor and engineer Garen Holt led a 4-person team to approach. They wore biological monitoring gear and attached live streaming cameras to transmit everything back to the control station. As they stepped through the threshold, the space inside changed abruptly. The temperature rose to a steady 23 degrees Celsius, as though a perfect air conditioning system were operating, despite no visible power source. The air was clean. No stench of decay, no trace of decomposition. And right there, in the first hallway, about 12 meters long, they saw 12 bodies lying in perfect symmetry on the floor. Each lay on their back, eyes open, hands neatly folded over the chest, as if in ceremonial rest. They wore civilian clothing from the 1950s, wool collars, brass buttons, still intact in color and sheen. No blood, no wounds. Only one thing sent chills through everyone. The bodies were still warm. Garin used a biosensor to measure their temperature, 36.8 degrees Celsius, perfectly accurate. But when he checked their heart rate, nothing. No pulse, no reflexes. Yet the blood had not coagulated. One body, a woman around 30 years old, eyes open and staring at the ceiling, still had a faint glimmer of life in her pupils. Eleanor leaned down for a closer look, and at the moment her hand touched the woman's shoulder, the corpse's eyelid twitch, just slightly. A tiny movement, but enough to make the whole team behind her step back. Footage from a body camera captured it clearly, a subtle eyelid twitch, just once, then stillness. They didn't dare touch anything after that. When the forensic team scanned the internal structure of the bodies, they discovered something alarming. The organs were perfectly preserved. The lungs were fully inflated, as if they had only just inhaled a final breath. A rapid blood analysis gave an unthinkable result. The red blood cells hadn't lysed, indicating the time of death had occurred less than 6 hours ago. But how could that be, when they had been lying in a sealed chamber at the bottom of the sea for more than 49 years? No identification was found on any of them, but in the jacket pocket of the oldest man, they discovered a small piece of paper carefully folded. On it was a line of faint, handwritten black ink. "We never went anywhere. The world simply went too far." When Eleanor read that line, her throat tightened. She couldn't tell if it was fear or emotion, but for a brief moment, she felt she had read those words somewhere before, in an old dream or from another life. At exactly 3:07 p.m. that same day, the hallway lights suddenly burst on. A series of red characters scrolled along the wall behind frosted glass. Eleanor brought the camera closer. The characters blinked once, then stopped, fixed in place like an executed command. Recalling memory block 12, last breath saved. No one fully understood what the message meant, but in that fleeting moment, everyone realized those 12 bodies were not corpses. They were final memories, preserved in flesh, of someone. No one in the team dared to remain in that compartment overnight. As they returned to the ship, the hallway camera silently scanned the area one last time. A faint shape appeared in the doorway, a 13th figure standing motionless in the dark, not moving, not stepping forward, not turning away. But when the camera panned back a second time, the figure was gone. March 26th, 2005. After hours of analyzing sonar maps and magnetic readings inside the hull of the Erethus, the research team discovered an unusual core located at the very center of the structure, a spherical space 9 meters in diameter, completely sealed off from the other compartments. This area did not respond to standard radar signals and generated an acoustic interference field almost identical to the frequency they had previously recorded at the ocean floor of the Silent Verge. The problem was, to reach this core, they had to pass through a tunnel nearly 50 meters long, a tunnel not present in the original blueprints, and one that only appeared digitally after 12 bodies were removed from the ship. The door to the tunnel opened slowly, silently. This time, there was no light, no metallic wall, only a thick, oppressive blackness, as though they weren't entering a vessel, but passing through a solid block of shadow. The researchers' headlamps could not penetrate more than 3 meters. All sound was muffled. Every footstep sank into silence. At the tunnel's end, as their body temperatures began to drop unnaturally, they stopped before a circular door with no handle, no locking mechanism. But when Eleanor placed her hand on its surface, ice cold and glass-like, the door didn't open. It simply vanished. No one breathed deeply as they stepped inside, because before them, at the center of a perfectly round chamber, floated a semi-transparent sphere, about 2 meters in diameter, emitting a soft violet-blue glow, like the flicker of half-opened eyes in the dark. The surface of the sphere was not still. It moved gently, like living skin breathing, but it had no vents, no mechanical structures. It was not a machine, not organic, yet it was alive. Engineer Garin attempted an EMF scan. The device instantly detected a smooth electrical wave pattern closely resembling human brain waves during REM sleep, the phase of deepest dreaming. But the rhythm was too stable, as if it wasn't dreaming. It was remembering. Then Eleanor began to see strange images in her mind. Endless white hallways with no exits, children's laughter fading into silence, sunless fields. They were not her memories, but they felt like they once belonged to her. No one spoke, but after leaving the chamber, each team member confirmed seeing similar visions, though the contents varied. Garen saw himself buried alive beneath glass. Diver Tom saw his wife, who had died 10 years earlier, staring at him from inside the sphere. When analyzing the radiation emitted by the sphere, the technical team found it resembled low-grade radioactivity, but unlike radioactive decay, it did not diminish over time. In fact, the energy levels increased whenever a person came closer, as if it was absorbing thought. Then, on the surface of the sphere, a line of symbols appeared, still in no known language, but this time crudely translated by the quantum AI interpreter. The message left the team speechless. Memory requires no host. I am where it is kept. Eleanor froze. In that moment, she understood. The Aerethus was not a vehicle for transport, but a colossal memory vessel, not a repository for the passengers, but for something non-human, something that once observed how humans felt, died, and existed. And it didn't need machines to operate. It used humans as its operating system. And so the question arose, had the 1,500 passengers from 1956 truly disappeared, or had each one of them been copied in memory, their emotions preserved and transformed into part of this sphere's neural structure? Because in the discovery log, at the rear of the spherical room, beyond a layer of frosted glass, they saw a suspended array of glowing circuits, each light point a cluster of tiny neurons, and on each cluster there was a name, not scientific identifiers, but full names with dates of birth, addresses, and the last emotional state before they vanished. On March 28, 2005, at exactly 3:27 a.m., the camera mounted on the Polaris 8 device, during its 14th dive, unexpectedly captured a very slow movement at the far end of compartment 4, an area previously marked on sonar maps as completely sealed off by an unidentified substance resembling fossilized living tissue. As the camera drew closer, the outer layer automatically retracted, revealing a short corridor leading into a circular chamber. No lights, no illumination mechanisms, yet every detail inside could be clearly seen. In that perfect silence stood 19 people, motionless, eyes open, arms hanging naturally at their sides, as if frozen in the flow of time. They wore thick 1950s-style clothing, long wool coats, berets, leather shoes lightly worn at the heels. None of them showed signs of illness, exhaustion, or physical trauma. They weren't asleep nor awake. They simply stood there, intact, like a still frame awaiting its next reel of motion. At 5:10 a.m., Eleanor was granted direct access, accompanied by 2 medical experts. Approaching a man who appeared to be in his 40s, she gently called out. No response. But when she lightly touched his arm, a heartbeat registered. Not fast, not irregular, exactly 62 beats per minute, steady and perfect. He blinked, turned to look at her, and with a calm, deep voice carrying the breath of a dream not yet fully faded, he said, "We were just in Halifax yesterday afternoon. Why are you dressed like someone from the future?" Eleanor didn't answer, but her hand trembled. They didn't know. They hadn't realized nearly half a century had passed. Their perception of time was only a few hours. Some still believed they were aboard a submarine that departed Tuesday afternoon. Others asked when they would arrive at the Reykjavik transfer station. A 9-year-old boy clutched an old red-painted wooden toy boat and asked where his parents were. Immediate biological tests were conducted. Their bodies were entirely stable. No signs of biological aging. No cellular degeneration. No graying of hair. Liver, kidney, and heart enzymes were consistent with those of healthy individuals. DNA confirmed they were indeed the listed passengers from a 1956 report. Once dismissed as a retracted rumor, they were real, and they hadn't aged a single day. No one could explain how it was possible. During memory assessments, Eleanor asked each of them to recount what they remembered. All described the same moment. A flash of white light inside the train car. No sound, no shaking. Then a sensation of weightlessness, as if drifting in a foggy sleep, with faint voices, voices that were not human, not frightening, but profound, echoing from somewhere inside their minds. The voice whispered, "Do not fear. We will keep this memory for you. When the world is large enough, you will return." An elderly woman named Liza Arnfield said the last thing she remembered was reading a book. Then the light engulfed the entire car. When Eleanor asked, "Do you know what year it is today?" she replied softly. It's 1956. What else could it be? The moment the 19 were brought aboard the Odessa Morn, something unprecedented occurred. All real-time systems on the ship, digital clocks, electronic compasses, pressure gauges, froze simultaneously at 0606 and remained non-functional for 13 minutes. All data afterward was automatically reset, as if nothing had ever been recorded. And within the central chamber of the Aerithus vessel, where the spherical intelligence module still floated in silence, onboard sensors detected a sudden shift in neural waveform patterns. Thought amplitude spiked, as though it had become more active, strengthening its connection to the memories that had just been awakened. A theory began to take shape within the research team. Those 19 people had never left the timeline. They had been separated from it. A segment of time, theirs alone, had been bent, looped, and preserved inside a non-human cognitive structure, and when that structure sensed the world had gone far enough, it gave them back. Eleanor was no longer convinced the Aerithus had ever truly disappeared. She began to believe it had never gone anywhere at all. It was time itself that had chosen not to move forward with it. On the morning of March 30th, 2005, the Odessa Morn was preparing to complete the final phase of its mission, marking coordinates, collecting samples for analysis, and submitting an initial report to the Arctic Ocean Survey Commission. But no one in the research team felt normal. Since the 19 survivors had been brought aboard, the atmosphere on the ship had grown heavier, almost oppressive. There was no concrete reason for concern, but the electronics began to malfunction in ways no one could explain. Thermometers fluctuated despite stable ambient temperatures. Audio recorders captured voices no one had spoken, and the alarm clock in engineer Garen Holt's cabin rang at exactly 3:15 every morning, the precise time the Aerithus had vanished 49 years earlier. At the same time, a new signal was detected, not from the cognitive sphere, nor from any previously explored compartments. This signal came from deeper down beneath the ship's lower hull, from a second layer of structure that had never been discovered. The exploration team believed it to be a hidden technical chamber, possibly housing a control core or energy center. But when they lowered a probe into it, what it recorded left the entire team shaken. In that space, almost 6 meters below the central floor, there were no machines, no instruments, only a humanoid shape, about 2 meters tall, curled into a fetal position as if asleep, surrounded by fine threads of glowing light attached to specific points on its skull, chest, and hands. The figure didn't move, but its skin, if it could be called that, was soft and moist, like living tissue. There were no facial features, no identifiable gender, just a blurred form, as if every trace of identity had been erased long ago. Eleanor realized something terrifying. The light structure clinging to this being matched exactly the neural patterns found in the cognitive sphere. Everything traced back to this. All the memory fragments, the suspended time, the people who hadn't aged, the 12 still warm bodies. All of it originated from this form. A horrifying theory emerged. This was not a person, but a living interface, a biological host through which a non-human intelligence had attempted to adapt to human consciousness. The sphere was merely an intermediary processing unit. The Aerithus itself was just a shell wrapped around this process. No one knew why it had been buried beneath the ocean. No one knew why 1,500 people had been invited onto a ship with no windows and no way out. But then, in the early hours of March 31st, as the crew prepared to depart, a series of events happened simultaneously. The entire electrical system aboard the ship shut down for exactly 0.7 seconds. The sphere emitted a low-frequency hum lasting 11 seconds, inaudible to ears, but felt by every chest on board. The 19 rescued individuals vanished without a trace. No doors opened, no motion detected. They simply disappeared as if they had never existed. The only remaining functioning recorder played back the last thing Eleanor had said the previous night. If this is memory, then who is remembering? And if memory knows it is remembering, would it choose to erase us? That morning, Eleanor disappeared from her cabin. She was never found. In the archives, only one document remained, typed on an old typewriter and left in the control room. No author, only a title. Aerithus is not a ship. It is a replica of cosmic intelligence, placed here to experiment with human memory. When we understand it, it no longer needs us. 3 days later, the Danish government and the North Oceanic Union officially declared the Silent Periphery a classified research zone, closed to all access indefinitely. All photos, footage, and internal reports were confiscated. Only one video, 6 seconds long, of unknown origin leaked onto the dark web in 2007. In it, a thin woman, barefoot, head bowed, walks alone through a metallic corridor of a windowless ship. Her voice, faint and distant, says, "Memory doesn't die. It just waits for the world to forget." So, if what we remember isn't truly ours but merely software running inside the system of some ancient intelligence, then who are we really?